I was keeping a secret lover in my garage. A little white fox I was raising in secret. I swore I was going to spoil her rotten, just to spite my wife. But things got weird fast. Every time I snuck away to get close to my little vixen, my cool and distant wife, Serafina, would act as if she were under a spell. She'd get all flushed, her heart would race, and she'd be short of breath. The more I showered my affection on the fox, the more she'd melt into a puddle. It wasn't until one day she confessed, "Honey, I have to come clean. I'm the vixen," that I learned my wife was a 1,000-year-old nine-tailed fox, and the pet I was pampering was her doppelganger. A doppelganger that later gained its own consciousness and transformed into a little fox girl. All I could do was watch as the two of them, one big and one small, stirred up a storm in my life. "Serafina, sweetie, come on, just say yes," I begged, clinging to her arm like I didn't have a bone in my body. "Just one. We'll just get one husky." I buried my head in the crook of her neck, using every ounce of charm I'd ever learned. Think about it. Our place would be so much more fun with a goofy husky tearing around, a little beautiful chaos every day. Serafina, finally worn down by my pestering, showed a reaction. She lazily pushed me off, leaning back against the sofa and stretching out her long legs, looking effortlessly captivating. Her red lips parted, a playful tone in her voice. "Why a husky?" she asked. "They're number one when it comes to wrecking the house. You think this place is too tidy or something? You'd be better off getting a fox." "A fox?" I shot up from the sofa like a cat whose tail had just been stepped on. "A fox?" My voice cracked. "Honey, are you kidding me? Everything online says they stink. Like knock you over, make your eyes water stink." I waved my arms around frantically, as if I could already smell the imaginary stench. "No way, absolutely not. A dog is what we need. Loyal, cute. Okay, huskies are a little dumb, but they're fun." Serafina just watched me, unbothered by my outburst. She simply shifted into a more comfortable position and said slowly, "That's because you haven't seen a good one. Foxes are much smarter than dogs." The next few days were the beginning of my nightmare. Serafina transformed into a global fox ambassador, relentlessly selling me on the idea at every opportunity. At dinner, she'd pick up a piece of meat. "See, foxes love this. They're omnivores, easy to feed." Watching a nature documentary on TV. "Look at that. See how clever that fox is? Such captivating eyes." Before bed, she'd hug her pillow. "Fox fur is 100 times softer than this pillow. It would be so comfortable to sleep with." I was losing my mind. My ears were filled with fox, fox, fox. They're so smart and affectionate, and they know how to cuddle. They're thoughtful and understand their owner's feelings 100 times better than some dumb husky. And they're very clean. They don't stink at all. I covered my ears and rolled around on the sofa. "Serafina, I'm begging you, I was wrong. I'll never mention getting a pet again, okay? Let's just enjoy our life, the two of us. No more talk of dogs or foxes. I just wanted a dog." My prejudice against foxes was deeply ingrained. Nothing she could say would change my mind. Seeing how stubborn I was, Serafina finally sighed. I thought she'd given up and was just starting to relax when she murmured, "It really would be nice, you know, having a little fox." My patience finally snapped. I leaped off the sofa, all thoughts of marital harmony gone. I pointed a finger at the ceiling and, with all the strength I could muster, announced to the entire apartment, "I, Leo Carter, am putting my foot down. I would sooner jump off this building and die on the street than ever own a fox." The declaration echoed in the living room, filled with resolute, masculine finality. I stood there, panting, waiting for her reaction. A screaming match? The silent treatment? Neither. Not only was she not angry, but a knowing smile played on her lips. It was a cunning, mysterious smile, just like the foxes she described. She didn't say a word, but her eyes seemed to say, "Is that so? We'll see." The echo of my dramatic vow was still ringing in my ears. On my way home from work, I was still trying to figure out a new angle to convince my dear wife to grant me permission to get a dog. If not a husky, maybe a golden retriever. As I was walking through the apartment complex, lost in thought, a white shadow shot out of the bushes. It zipped straight to my feet, stopped, and began licking my hand with a warm tongue. Startled, I looked down. It was a little dog. It was pure white, without a single stray hair, glowing like a snowball under the evening lamps. Its eyes, big, round, and dark, stared up at me as its tail wagged furiously. My heart skipped a beat. This was one beautiful little dog, and it looked like a stray, no collar. It was incredibly friendly. When I didn't react, it started rubbing its little head against my pant leg, whining softly. But there was something strange about its affection. It wasn't the boisterous enthusiasm of a puppy, but something more. Alluring, more intimate. I crouched down to pet it. An older lady carrying a grocery basket paused beside me. "He's a cute one, isn't he?" she said with a kind smile. I nodded, smiling back. "Yeah, he's adorable." The lady chuckled. "Adorable? Yes, but you might want to take a closer look. That's not a dog. It's a fox." A fox? My mind went blank like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. The vow I'd made just days ago came crashing back down on me, word for word. I would sooner jump off this building. My face flushed hot with embarrassment. It was like the universe was laughing at me. I instinctively stood up and turned to leave. This was too humiliating. But I'd barely taken a step when I felt a tug on my pants. I looked down. The little white fox had my cuff clamped firmly in its teeth, refusing to let me go. It was as if it knew I was about to abandon it. Its big eyes, so watery they looked like they were about to overflow, stared at me pitifully. It let out a soft, mournful whine that just about broke my heart. My feet felt like they were encased in lead. I couldn't move. I hesitated, studying it more closely. Its fur was spotless, fluffy, and clean, with none of the matted mess you'd expect from stray. I even leaned in for a sniff. Forget a foul odor. It didn't smell bad at all. In fact, it had a faint, milky scent. Who said foxes stank? This one smelled wonderful. Seeing me pause, the little fox seemed to sense a glimmer of hope. It bit down harder and pawed at my shoe, its whole demeanor screaming cuddle me. My heart melted on the spot. So cute, so affectionate, so clean. This was my dream pet. As if possessed, I crouched down again and tried to communicate with it. "Hey little guy, do you have an owner?" Something incredible happened. The little fox, as if it understood me perfectly, shook its head vigorously, like a little bobblehead. I was stunned. Was this fox some kind of genius? Suppressing my shock, I tried again. "So, you want to come home with me?" The fox immediately started nodding like crazy, its tail wagging so fast it was a blur, a little propeller on its backside. I was completely smitten. Looking at this incredibly intelligent little creature, my eyes practically turned into hearts. A ridiculous thought popped into my head. A pure white spirit fox. Maybe it could turn into a magical fox made in one day, just like in one of those fantasy shows I watched. If that happened, would I choose my wife or the fox maiden? I shook my head, laughing at my own stupid fantasy. Get a grip, Leo. That stuff doesn't happen in real life. But the temptation in front of me was too great. Cuteness defeated my vow. Who cares about saving face? It was worthless compared to this adorable little thing. My mind was made up. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. I scooped up the little fox, determined to raise it in secret. Serafina could never know. If she found out, she'd use my dramatic vow to make fun of me for the rest of my life. Cradling the gentle creature in my arms, I hatched a plan. I'd keep it in my private garage stall downstairs. No one would ever know. Clutching the white fox, I snuck into the underground parking garage like a thief. Thankfully, it was empty at this hour. I opened my garage stall, slipped inside, and immediately shut the door. My heart was pounding. The little fox was perfectly behaved, just looking around curiously. I set it down and started setting up its new home. The stall was mostly empty, so I quickly cleared a corner. I found an old cardboard box in my trunk to serve as its bed and laid out an old blanket I use for naps. After getting that sorted, I remembered the most important thing. What did it eat? I slapped my forehead and, once again like a thief, snuck out of the garage and headed for the nearest pet store. "Excuse me, what do foxes eat?" The store owner looked at me like I was an idiot. "A fox? You have a fox. Aren't they becoming popular pets in the city now?" I mumbled evasively. "It's a friend's. I'm just watching it for a bit." The owner, only half convinced, recommended some top-of-the-line cat food and dog food. Foxes are canids, so they're similar to dogs, but their habits are a bit like cats. You should try both. With bags of cat and dog food, a water bowl, a food dish, and a pile of small toys, I returned to the garage. I turned a corner of the stall into a luxury pet suite. Everything was ready. All that was left was feeding time. I opened the cat food, poured a little into the dish, and pushed it in front of the little white fox. It leaned in, its nose twitching as it sniffed. Then, with a look of utter disgust, it turned its head away, refusing to even touch it. Fine, no cat food. I opened the dog food and poured a fresh bowl. Same result. It sniffed, walked away, and even pawed at the dish as if to say, "Get this garbage out of here." I started to panic. This little princess couldn't starve on my watch. I was pacing and wringing my hands while it sat in the corner, licking its paws with a look that clearly said, "I am not amused." I was out of options. I took my own dinner out of my bag. It was a lovingly prepared meal from Serafina that I was supposed to eat at home. There were braised short ribs, roasted asparagus, and fluffy jasmine rice. On a whim, I picked out a small, boneless piece of rib meat and held it out. The little fox's nose twitched again. This time, its eyes lit up. It cautiously approached, extended its little pink tongue for a lick, and then, gulp, devoured the meat in one bite. Success! I mixed a little rice with the savory juices from the meat, and it gobbled that up too. I remember the store owner saying its habits were like a cat's, and cats like milk. I happened to have a carton of organic milk in my car. I poured some into a bowl, and sure enough, it drank every last drop, licking its lips with satisfaction. I had finally cracked the code. From then on, my life became exceptionally full. I stopped eating lunch with my coworkers, instead sneaking down to the garage to prepare milk and oatmeal for my little friend. Before going home for the night, I had to make a stop at the garage to give it half of the delicious dinner my wife had made for me. I named her Snowy. Snowy was incredibly affectionate. She was always perfectly behaved when I fed her. I could pet her from head to tail, and she never got possessive of her food, just purred with contentment. I was completely hooked. Snowy's fur was impossibly soft and smooth. The feel of it was pure bliss. My favorite thing was rubbing her belly, a little ball of fluff. Every time I reached for it, she'd roll on her back, exposing her most vulnerable spot, letting me do as I pleased. Hearing her happy little whimpers, I felt the stress of the day melt away. My life settled into a strange new routine: office, garage, home. After work, I'd go home first, chat with Serafina for a bit, and pretend everything was normal. Then I'd find an excuse to slip down to the garage. Honey, I'm just going down to the car to grab a file. Sweetie, I'm just going to check if the tires look a little low. And then, it would be my secret time with my secret lover, Snowy. We'd play fetch in the garage, or late at night when no one was around, I'd sneak her out to the grassy area in the complex for a walk. This double life was thrilling and sweet, but was also filled with guilt, especially when I came back up from the garage. I always felt like the way Serafina looked at me was strange. A half smile, full of probing curiosity, as if she knew everything. But I didn't dare ask. I was too guilty. I just told myself I was overthinking it, a side effect of my guilty conscience. This secret life of hiding a vixen lasted for almost a month, and I started to notice a very, very strange phenomenon. Every time, and I mean every time, I finished playing with Snowy, especially after a really good belly rub session that left her sprawled out and whimpering with pleasure, I would go back home and find Serafina acting off. Her cheeks would always be tinged with a rosy blush, like she'd just run a marathon. At first, I didn't think much of it, but after it happened so many times, even an idiot would have noticed something was up. One evening, I gave Snowy a thorough, deep tissue massage in the garage, pampering her from head to tail. She was so blissed out she could barely move. Satisfied, I went back home. The moment I opened the door, I saw Serafina leaning against the entryway cabinet, her face as red as a ripe apple. I finally couldn't hold back anymore. Honey, what were you doing? I walked over and felt her forehead. It was a little warm. You're so flushed. Did you just get out of sauna? Serafina's eyes darted away. She pointed to a new yoga mat in the corner of the living room, her breath still a little ragged. No, nothing. Just did a workout with a video. Got a little sweaty. It's a bit warm. I followed her gaze and saw the brand new mat. Still, I thought it was odd. Who works out right after dinner? That's not good for your stomach, I said, stating the obvious. You're really taking this health kick seriously, huh? I didn't give a second thought. Just figure my wife had suddenly gotten into wellness. Serafina's gaze drifted as she mumbled. It wasn't a strenuous workout. Just very draining. Her voice was too quiet, and I didn't catch it. What? What did you say? Nothing, she said, her voice suddenly louder as she pushed me towards the bathroom. Go take a shower. You smell like you've been sweating. I didn't think any more of it. My thoughts quickly returned to Snowy. I had discovered that her absolute favorite thing was having her belly rubbed. Every time I buried my face in her soft, fluffy tummy and nuzzled it, she would go limp, all four paws in the air, the tip of her tail trembling with excitement as she let out a contented purr. The feeling of pure softness and comfort was completely addictive. I couldn't get enough. That night, using the excuse of taking out the trash, I spent a long time with Snowy in the garage. I performed an unprecedentedly thorough, deep massage, rubbing her until she was a boneless puddle of fur in my arms. When I returned home, content and humming a tune, I was met with a shocking sight. Serafina was pressed against the wall, inching her way toward the bedroom. Her breathing was rapid. When she saw me, her eyes were filled with resentment. Honey, were you working out again? I asked tentatively. She shot me a glare, a look that was somehow both incredibly alluring and filled with a hint of gritted teeth anger. Yes, she bit out, then continued her slow journey down the hall. I stood there completely baffled. Something was wrong. Seriously, fundamentally wrong. My wife's reactions always perfectly coincided with the times I was pampering the fox. The more intensely I petted the fox, the stronger her reaction was. A wild, unbelievable, and even slightly twisted idea began to form in my mind. Could it be? I felt my heart pound, like it was about to leap out of my throat. My chance to find out came soon enough. Once again, I returned from the garage to find my wife in her familiar post-workout state. She was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with a wry smile. This time, she spoke before I could. "Honey," she cooed, her voice lazy and drawn out. "You can stop sneaking around." My stomach dropped. My knees went weak, and I almost fell to the floor right there. My cover was blown. She knew. She knew I was keeping a little vixen behind her back. I was done for. My dramatic vow, my secret mistress. It was all over. I was already bracing for a lecture, for her to taunt me about my anti-fox stance. I was about to squeeze out a few tears and beg for mercy. But then Serafina just sighed and continued. "I know you're keeping a little vixen." She said the word vixen with a deep, knowing tone, each syllable hitting me like a tiny hammer. I froze, my mind a complete blank. However, the storm I was expecting never came. Serafina wasn't angry at all. She just sighed again. "Bring her inside. It's too cold in the garage. Poor little thing." What? I thought I'd misheard. I snapped my head up, staring at her in shock. There was no anger on her face, only a hint of resignation and affection. "Honey, you're not mad." "Why would I be mad?" she said, rolling her eyes. "Getting angry at a little animal? I have more class than that." I was instantly overcome with a mix of shock and joy, like I'd been lifted from hell to heaven. I scratched the back of my head sheepishly, feeling like a kid caught misbehaving but let off with a warning. "Okay, thank you, honey. You're the best." I was practically crying with relief. Serafina couldn't help but laugh at my foolish expression. She walked over, pinched my cheek, and switched into full-on sarcastic mode. "Oh my," she began. "And who was it that stood in the living room, pointing to the heavens and swearing he'd sooner die on the street than ever on a fox?" My face turned beet red. She mimicked my dramatic pose, her tone exaggerated. "And look at you now. Not only did you get one, but you snuck a little vixen in from outside. You've really come up in the world, haven't you, Leo?" The boomerang had come back and hit me squarely in the face. Being called out on my own hypocrisy by my wife was mortifying. But mostly, I just felt a sweet sense of being indulged. All I could do was chuckle foolishly, unable to offer a single word in my defense as she scolded me. "Go on, go get your little lover and bring her up," Serafina said, letting go of my cheek and giving me a gentle push. Granted a full pardon, I practically flew down the stairs. Snowy was officially welcomed into our home. I could finally pet my fox on the living room sofa, out in the open. As I rubbed Snowy's soft belly, I marveled at my wife's generosity and kindness. I had truly married an angel. I was completely oblivious to the fact that this wasn't the end of the storm. It was just the calm before a much bigger one. After Snowy moved in, the weirdness didn't stop. In fact, it escalated. Before, it was a coincidence of timing. Now it was synchronized in space. I discovered that the moment my hand touched the fox, my wife, sitting right next to me, would simultaneously start to blush. The atmosphere in our home grew more and more peculiar. My wild theory resurfaced. After dinner, it was time for our usual family ritual. I was sprawled on the sofa, Serafina was sitting to my left reading a book, and Snowy was napping to my right. A picture of perfect harmony. While watching some mindless reality show, I habitually reached out and rested my hand on Snowy's stomach, starting to knead it unconsciously. Snowy, enjoying the massage, whimpered softly and rolled over, exposing her even softer, more defenseless belly. I applied a little more pressure. Almost at the exact same instant, I heard a tiny, sharp intake of breath from my left. I turned my head. Serafina's body had gone rigid, her breath catching for a moment. The book in her hands fell with a soft thud onto the wool rug. She looked like she'd been jolted by an electric shock. "Honey, what's wrong?" I asked with concern. Serafina frantically bent over to pick up her book, her eyes avoiding mine, her words stumbling out. And nothing. Even she didn't believe that excuse. What kind of book could provoke a reaction like that? An illustrated guide to electroshock therapy? My eyes were filled with suspicion, but she buried her face in the book, adopting a clear "don't ask me, I don't want to talk about it" posture. I had to let it go, but the cloud of doubt in my mind grew heavier. A few days later, my curiosity finally got the better of me. As I watched Snowy sleeping soundly on the sofa, a bold and wicked idea popped into my head. I'd had her for this long, and still didn't know if she was a boy or a girl. My wife was in the kitchen preparing fruit. The time was ripe. I rubbed my hands together with a mischievous grin and quietly crept closer, like some kind of predator. As I reached out to part the fur on Snowy's hind legs, I muttered under my breath, Let's have Daddy see if our little Snowy is a boy fox or a girl fox. My hand had just brushed against the fluffy base of her legs. Before the words had even fully left my mouth, a loud clang echoed from the kitchen. The sound was sharp and piercing, like a metal pan hitting the tile floor. It was immediately followed by a short, stifled gasp. Startled, I looked back. Serafina was flushed crimson, so red it looked like steam might start rising from her skin. She had one hand braced on the cold countertop, the other clutched to her chest, and her whole body was trembling slightly. The look she gave me was a mixture of shame, panic, and a hint of pleading I didn't understand at the time. A spatula lay at her feet. In that single moment, all the coincidences, all the doubts, all the bizarre phenomena clicked into place, forming a perfectly clear line. I was finally 100% certain. My wife's reactions were linked to my actions toward Snowy, with some kind of mystical, precise, one-to-one connection. I felt like I was on the verge of uncovering an earth-shattering secret. My heart hammered against my ribs, and blood roared in my ears. I was excited, nervous, and filled with the thrill of a prank about to succeed. I decided it was time for the ultimate test. I devised a perfect fishing expedition. That evening, after dinner, Serafina laid out her yoga mat in the living room as usual, probably hoping to use the exercise to mask or alleviate her strange reactions. She had just settled into her starting pose, ready to begin her mysterious wellness routine. The opportunity had arrived. I sat down on the sofa across from her, holding Snowy, an innocent look on my face. It was the perfect vantage point. "You go ahead and do your thing, honey. I'll just play with Snowy for a bit," I said, giving her a gentle, supportive smile. Serafina glanced at me, a flicker of nervousness in her eyes, but she nodded. "Excellent. The fish has taken the bait." I took a deep breath. My face was calm, but inside, I was smiling like a hunter. The experiment would now officially begin. Step 1. Foreplay. The ear offensive. I first launched an attack on one of Snowy's most sensitive areas, her ears. Using the pad of my index finger, I began to lightly and quickly scratch the soft spot just behind her ears. The fur there was short and dense, and Snowy immediately squeezed her eyes shut in pleasure. Out of the corner of my eye, I kept Serafina locked in my sights. I saw her eyes close as well, her long lashes trembling. The lines of her body unconsciously relaxed, her entire posture softening. It's working. Seeing my chance, I immediately moved to phase 2. Climax, the belly bonanza. I abruptly shifted my attack to Snowy's softest, most defenseless spot, her belly. My 10 fingers moved like they were playing a rousing symphony. Sometimes I would gently trace circles with my fingertips. Other times I would vigorously rub with my palms. I even deployed my signature move, burying my entire face in her fluff. My nose was filled with her milky scent and the feeling of overwhelming softness. I let out an exaggerated sigh of bliss. Wow, Snowy's belly is so soft and smells so good. Almost at the exact instant my face sank into Snowy's belly, I clearly heard it. MMPH. Serafina could no longer hold back. Her face was as red as it could possibly get. I knew it was time. Time for the final blow. I shot up from Snowy's belly, my eyes shining with a frightening intensity. I looked at the completely overwhelmed Serafina and announced loudly, "Snowy, you're such a good girl. For final treat, let's have Daddy see if you're a boy fox or a girl fox, okay?" With that, I lunged, my hands shooting towards Snowy's hind legs to part them. Serafina finally broke. Don't play with Snowy anymore." Her voice was on the verge of tears, full of pleading. "Honey, I confess." I released the bewildered fox from my arms. She was probably wondering why her owner was acting so strangely today. Feigning composure, I walked step by step toward my wife, who was now as limp as a noodle. I knelt, admiring her incredibly captivating state. Then, I reached out, gently took her small chin in my hand, and forced her to look at me. I gave her what I hoped was my most wicked, most charming smile. "Talk, my dear wife. What exactly is going on here?" Serafina's eyelashes were still fluttering as she gasped for air, trying to calm herself. After a long moment, she finally found her voice. She looked at me, her eyes filled with resignation, shame, and a sense of relief. I'm not human," she said, the first words coming out with great difficulty. My heart was in my throat. "I'm a 9-tailed fox who's lived for over 1,000 years. Boom. My brain shut down. 9-tailed fox. My wife. 1,000 years? The sheer amount of information in that one sentence was enough to fry my CPU. Seeing my stunned expression, she gave a bitter smile and continued to explain. Before, when you said you wanted a dog, I thought, well, they're both canids, so you might as well get one of my kind. If you had a fox, I could help look after it. But I never expected you to not only refuse, but to say that foxes stink." Her voice held a hint of grievance. I was hurt and annoyed, so I decided to play a little joke on you, and also show you how lovely foxes can be. So I used my powers to create a doppelganger. She pointed to Snowy, who was still on the sofa, licking her paws. "That's her. This doppelganger and I. We share the same senses." Her face turned red again. "Everything Snowy feels, I feel at the same time. So," her voice grew quieter, almost a whisper. "So all those things you did to her, petting her, rubbing her, nuzzling her, you were basically doing them to me." I finally understood. No wonder her reactions were so intense. When I petted Snowy's ears, I was petting her ears. When I rubbed Snowy's belly, I was rubbing her belly. And when I wanted to check Snowy's gender, I didn't dare think about it. My own face started to burn. This was too much. Serafina buried her face in her arms, her voice muffled. "At first, I just wanted you to accept foxes. But gradually, when you petted her, it felt really good for me, too. I even got a little addicted." But she suddenly looked up, her tone frustrated. "Over the last few months, I realized the sensory link between me and Snowy has been getting weaker, almost disappearing. It's like she's developing her own mind. She's almost stopped listening to me. Now, when you pet her, sometimes I feel it, and sometimes I don't." She looked at me accusingly. "Honey, you have to know that on again, off again, not quite there feeling is the most frustrating thing of all." I didn't know, in fact, but it sounded pretty awful. Having said her piece, Serafina looked up at me with misty, pleading eyes. Then, right before my astonished gaze, with a soft pop, two fluffy, white, pointed fox ears sprouted from her silky black hair. The ears twitched slightly with nervousness. She took my hand and placed it on her burning cheek. In a voice thick with emotion, the ultimate form of a coquettish plea, she made her final request. "Honey, can you please stop rubbing that little vixen? Come and pet me instead." My brain short-circuited for a full 3 seconds. Then, an immense, unparalleled joy washed over me like a tsunami. My wife is a fox spirit, a 1,000-year-old, 9-tailed fox, and she can sprout animal ears? What kind of divine story had I stumbled into? Did I save the galaxy in a past life, or something? I wasn't the least bit scared. In fact, I was so excited, I nearly jumped for joy. I carefully reached out my hand, as if approaching a priceless treasure. Gently, with just my fingertips, I touched one of the white fox ears on her head. Oh my God, fluffy, warm. The texture was delicate and soft, 1,000 times more comfortable than the most luxurious cashmere I'd ever touched. The instant my finger made contact, the ear twitched sensitively, and a faint pink blush spread across it. Serafina's body shivered in response. My heart melted completely. "Honey, can you do anything else?" My curiosity was overflowing. My eyes were shining like a kid who'd just discovered a new toy. Serafina was embarrassed by my intense stare, but she couldn't resist my hopeful gaze. She nodded. A soft white light enveloped her. When it faded, the woman in loungewear was gone. In her place stood a stunning fox goddess in flowing, ornate robes. She was cool, elegant, and impossibly beautiful. Most importantly, a huge, fluffy white fox tail swayed gracefully behind her. She lifted her eyes, her gaze so enchanting it could steal a man's soul. Before I could recover from the shock, another flash of light. The cool goddess vanished. In her place was a girl who looked no older than 17 or 18, wearing a pleated skirt, her eyes wide with innocence. A schoolgirl fox. She stood there shyly, nervously clutching the hem of her skirt, the fox ears on her head drooping with anxiety. The sight instantly ignited an overwhelming protective instinct within me. Who could resist that kind of whiplash-inducing cuteness? My attention was quickly captured by the big, fluffy tail behind her. I couldn't hold back any longer. I dove forward like a starving tiger and wrapped my arms around that magnificent tail. Whoa! I buried my face in it. Heaven. This was heaven. Soft, fluffy, warm, and carrying my wife's unique, fragrant scent. Hey, that tickles. Serafina giggled, her body swaying as my hug pulled at the base of her tail, making her lose her balance. The living room filled with our sweet, playful laughter. I held my fox goddess wife, one moment pinching her ears, the next playing with her tail, completely absorbed in my newfound joy. A whole new world had just opened up for me. I finally understood. My wife's so-called workouts weren't about wellness at all. After the sensory link started to fade, she was craving that feeling of being petted. So she had to use her own magic to simulate the experience. and it was clearly exhausting her. Thinking about it made me feel both sorry for her and amused. My silly, silly wife. From that day on, the hierarchy in our house was turned completely upside down. Snowy, on the sofa, was utterly dethroned. She went from my secret lover to a common pet, and was quickly becoming an inconvenient third wheel. All my time after work was now dedicated to exploring. No, to pampering my wife in all her various new forms. That night, I finally witnessed my wife's ultimate form. Under my adoring and expectant gaze, Serafina lay on the bed as one by one, two, three, a full 9 enormous, fluffy, snow-white tails unfurl behind her. The 9 tails bloomed like giant white flowers, instantly filling most of the bedroom. The sight was so magnificent and stunning it left me speechless. "Are you cold, honey?" Serafina asked with a smile. Then, with a thought, the 9 tails, as if they had a life of their own, gently wrapped around me, layer by layer. I felt myself sink into the world's softest, warmest, and safest cloud. This all-natural, temperature-controlled 9-tail blanket was warm in the winter, cool in the summer, and smelled faintly of my wife. This was a luxury that not even ancient emperors could have enjoyed. I sighed in contentment, burying my face in the fluffy tails, wanting to stay there forever. Serafina curled up in my arms like a satisfied cat. The fox ears on her head would occasionally brush against my chin and cheeks, ticklish yet incredibly comforting and sweet. I held her tight, listening as she told me fascinating stories from her 1,000 years of life. Our daily life became increasingly sweet. In the morning, I was no longer woken by an alarm clock, but by the gentle pat of a fluffy tail. At breakfast, she would use the tip of her tail to playfully hook the leg of my chair. While watching TV, my hand no longer reached for Snowy, but naturally rested on my wife's ears, gently rubbing them. And when Serafina was cooking in the kitchen, her big tail would sway unconsciously with her mood, an unbelievably cute sight. I found that when my wife was in her fox form, she seemed to be more keenly aware of my emotions. When I was tired from work, she would use her softest tail to gently massage my shoulders. I found that when my wife was in her fox form, she seemed to be more keenly aware of my emotions. When I was tired from work, she would use her softest tail to gently massage my shoulders. When I was happy about a successful project, her ears would stand up straight with excitement, and her tail would wag like a fan. In this ocean of sweet bliss, only one fox seemed out of place, and that was Snowy. Ever since Serafina came clean, Snowy had been subjected to my heartless neglect. Most of the time, she would lie by herself in a corner of the sofa, watching the two of us be inseparable with her big, dark, shining eyes. There was something new in her gaze, something I had never seen before. But I was completely lost in the immense happiness of having a fox goddess wife. The days flew by. One evening, I came home from work having just closed a big deal. I was in a great mood, but physically exhausted. I threw myself onto the sofa like a sack of potatoes. "Welcome home, honey. You must be tired." Serafina's gentle voice came from the kitchen. She wore an apron, the picture of a perfect wife. She came over, helped me with my coat, and then returned to the kitchen to prepare a lavish dinner. Everything was warm, harmonious, and peaceful. I was closing my eyes, enjoying the rare moment of tranquility. Suddenly, a white shadow launched itself into my arms with astonishing speed. Yep, it was Snowy. She was unusually enthusiastic today, hitting my chest like a little cannonball. Then, without any warning, she started licking my face frantically, more persistent and affectionate than ever before. I chuckled, gently prying her off my face. All right, Snowy. What got into you today?" I habitually held her in my lap, one hand stroking her head while the other expertly found that soft spot on her belly. However, the moment my palm made contact with that warm, soft fur, something changed. A blinding yet gentle, white light erupted from the little fox in my arms. It was so bright, I instinctively shut my eyes. When the light faded, I felt that the weight and texture in my lap had changed. The fluffy feeling was gone, replaced by the touch of warm, soft, and supple skin. I opened my eyes in shock. The little fox in my arms was gone. In her place was a cute fox goddess wearing a white dress, complete with a pair of fluffy fox ears and a single, bushy foxtail. A pair of big eyes, identical to Snowy's, blinked up at me. I was completely stunned. My hand was still awkwardly resting on her stomach. I was petrified, holding this strange daughter who had appeared out of nowhere, completely a loss, my mind a total blank. Just then, the kitchen door opened. Serafina emerged with a fragrant platter of sweet and sour pork ribs, a happy smile on her face. "Honey, dinner's." Her voice died in her throat. She saw the scene on the sofa. She saw me, and she saw the fox goddess in my arms who looked just like a miniature version of herself. The smile on her face froze instantly. She slammed the platter down on the dining table with a loud bang. The showdown had begun. Serafina put her hands on her hips, her eyebrows arched in fury, and stormed over to the sofa. She didn't look at me. Her glare was fixed on the little fox girl in my lap. Oh, really? Really? Her voice trembled with rage. I created you with my magic to win him over, not to become a little traitor. I was wondering why I'd completely lost control of this body, why even the sensory link was severed. So you cultivated your own consciousness to try and steal my man. The fox goddess in my arms, I guess I should just call her Snowy now, showed no signs of backing down in the face of the original. Not only did she not get out of my lap, she hugged me even tighter. She rubbed her little face against my chest, over and over, just like she used to when she was a fox. Then, in a voice as sweet as syrup, she announced loudly and proudly, "He's my daddy. Daddy likes me more. See? The moment he sees me, he wants to be close to me, and he loves petting my head." Serafina looked like she was about to explode. No, no, no. She surged forward, grabbed Snowy out of my lap like she was picking up a kitten by the scruff, and tossed her onto the other end of the sofa. Then, with an air of absolute dominance, she sat herself in my lap. She planted a loud, possessive kiss on my cheek. Turning to glare at Snowy, she made her boss bitch declaration. "There's only room for one vixen in my husband's lap. Besides, my husband obviously prefers petting this big fox goddess, and he loves it when this fox rubs her scent all over him." I watched the two of them, one big and one small, two identical fox goddesses, bickering endlessly over the right to use my lap. I held the fragrant, soft, full-size fox goddess in my arms and looked at the pouting, miniature fox goddess at the other end of the sofa. End.